The execution device so horrific. Medieval laws banned it, they could hear the screaming from 3 streets away. But these weren't human screams anymore. They'd been transformed into something far more disturbing. The agonized cries of a human being, channeled through bronze pipes and acoustic chambers, emerged as the bellowing of a bull. The sound echoed through the narrow streets of ancient Akragas, bouncing off stone walls and penetrating the souls of everyone who heard it. Inside a massive bronze statue shaped like a bull, a man was being slowly roasted alive. His flesh was cooking from the outside in, his blood boiling in his veins, his organs failing one by one as the temperature inside the bronze beast climbed past human endurance. This was Sicily, 570 BCE, and the victim writhing in unimaginable agony was Perillos of Athens, the very man who had invented the device that was now ending his life in the most horrific way imaginable. The Brazen Bull. Even saying the name conjures images of unspeakable cruelty. This was an execution device so horrific, so fundamentally evil in its conception, that even the tyrants and despots of the ancient world eventually banned it. Not out of mercy, mind you, but out of fear. Tonight, we're going to uncover the real reason why medieval laws outlawed this ancient horror, and the answer isn't what you've been told. Perillos of Athens was what we might call today an engineer, though in ancient Greece, he was known as a bronze worker and inventor. He had traveled across the Mediterranean to Sicily with what he believed was a gift that would make him wealthy beyond imagination. In his possession were detailed blueprints for an execution device unlike anything the world had ever seen, a perfect fusion of artistry and cruelty. The tyrant Phalaris ruled Akragas with an iron fist. Historical accounts describe him as a man whose cruelty was legendary even by ancient standards. Mothers would whisper his name to frighten disobedient children. Merchants would take longer routes to avoid his territory. His reputation for creative brutality had spread across the Greek world, and it was this reputation that drew Perillos to his court. When Perillos presented his invention to Phalaris, he did so with the pride of an artist revealing his masterpiece. The device was elegant in its horror. A hollow bronze bull, perfectly crafted to be beautiful from the outside. Every detail was meticulously planned, from the realistic musculature to the precisely positioned nostrils. But the true genius, if we can call it that, lay hidden inside. The interior was a chamber of death, designed with a sophisticated system of pipes and acoustic chambers. When a victim was placed inside and a fire lit beneath, their screams wouldn't simply escape into the air. Instead, they would be channeled through these pipes, transformed and modulated until they emerged from the bull's mouth as the bellowing of an actual bull. The more the victim suffered, the more realistic and haunting the sound would become. Phalaris examined the device with the eye of a connoisseur of cruelty. He walked around it, running his hands over the smooth bronze surface, peering into the darkness within. He was impressed. More than impressed, he was delighted. But then he made a request that would seal Perillos's fate. "Show me," Phalaris said. "Demonstrate how these acoustics work. I want to understand the full effect before I commission this device." Perillos, eager to please and perhaps blinded by his proximity to power and wealth, climbed inside the bronze bull. He began to explain how the pipe system would transform human sounds, demonstrating with his own voice how the acoustics would modulate different tones. He was still explaining when he heard the sound that would be the beginning of his end, the clang of the bronze door being locked behind him. "Light the fire," Phalaris commanded his guards. The historical accounts differ on exactly what happened next. Some say Phalaris let Perillos burn completely, making him the first official victim of his own invention. Others, including the historian Lucian, claim that Phalaris had Perillos pulled out while still alive, only to have him thrown from a cliff to finish the execution. But all sources agree on the message Phalaris was sending. Those who create instruments of evil deserve to be the first to experience them. The bronze beast conducted heat with terrifying efficiency. The metal would slowly heat up, creating an oven-like environment inside. But this wasn't a quick death by flame. The victim essentially steamed in their own bodily fluids as the temperature gradually rose. First would come sweating, then blistering, then the breakdown of tissue as proteins denatured and cells burst. The victim would experience every moment of their body's destruction while still conscious. The acoustic system was precisely calibrated through trial and error, though we can only imagine how such calibration was achieved. Low moans from the dying would emerge as deep, resonant bellows. High-pitched screams of agony would be transformed into the angry snorting of an enraged bull. Some versions of the device even had movable heads that would nod and shake as the victim thrashed inside, creating the illusion that the bronze bull had come to life. But the Brazen Bull didn't die with its creator. For the next 16 years, Phalaris used it liberally on anyone who crossed him. Political enemies who spoke against his rule, criminals who had committed serious offenses, sometimes even innocent people who simply had the misfortune of attracting his attention, all found themselves inside the bronze beast. The Greek historian Diodorus Siculus provides us with one of our most detailed accounts. He writes that Phalaris became so associated with the bull that it defined his entire reign. The tyrant would hold elaborate public executions, turning suffering into spectacle. The crowd would gather in the agora, forced to attend these demonstrations of power. The message was clear: this is what happens to those who oppose me. But power built on fear is inherently unstable. In 554 BCE, the people of Akragas finally had enough. They rose up against Phalaris in a violent revolution. And when they captured him, they knew exactly what fate awaited him. The mob dragged the tyrant to his own brazen bull and forced him inside. The man who had sent so many to die in the bronze beast would experience firsthand the horror he had inflicted on others. Historical accounts say his bellowing could be heard throughout the city as he burned, a sound that many citizens said brought them a dark satisfaction. Justice delivered in bronze. Yet the Brazen Bull story doesn't end in ancient Sicily. When Rome conquered the Mediterranean, they inherited more than just territories and trade routes. They inherited methods of control, including instruments of torture and execution. The Romans, ever the innovators when it came to spectacle and suffering, didn't just adopt the Brazen Bull, they improved it. Roman engineers made modifications that reflected their particular genius for cruelty. They added iron spikes to the interior, positioned so that the victim couldn't find any position of relief. No matter how they moved or writhed, they would be pressing against sharp points. Some Roman versions included a system for collecting the rendered fat that would drip from the cooking victim. This was supposedly used for medicinal purposes, though the thought turns the stomach. The Romans also understood the importance of spectacle. They would sometimes add incense to the fires beneath the bull, so that the crowd would smell perfuming smoke rather than burning flesh. This allowed for longer exhibitions without the audience becoming sick from the stench. They positioned the bulls in amphitheaters where the acoustics would amplify the transformed screams, ensuring everyone could hear the entertainment. The Christian historian Eusebius provides us with haunting accounts of how Emperor Nero used the brazen bull on early Christians after the Great Fire of Rome in 64 CE. Nero, seeking scapegoats for the disaster that had destroyed much of the city, turned to the growing Christian community. The brazen bull became one of many instruments in his arsenal of persecution. One particularly disturbing account tells of Saint Eustace, a Roman general who converted to Christianity. According to church records, Emperor Hadrian ordered Eustace and his entire family, his wife Theopista and their 2 sons Agapius and Theopistus, to be burned alive in a brazen bull in 118 CE. The family was reportedly placed inside together, dying in each other's arms as the bronze heated around them. Their screams, transformed into the bellowing of the bull, were said to have continued for hours. But something began to change in the Roman attitude toward the device. By 300 CE, Emperor Constantine, who would become the first Christian emperor, issued an edict banning the brazen bull. The official reason given was not compassion or mercy, but something far stranger. The edict stated that the screams disturbed the gods, and that the device was an affront to divine order. What Constantine didn't put in the official record, but what appears in various historical fragments, is far more disturbing. There were reports, whispered accounts that were quickly suppressed, of something unnatural about the bull's bellowing. Sometimes, witnesses claimed, the sounds that emerged weren't just animal noises. They were words, names, accusations, secrets that the victim couldn't possibly have known. When medieval Europe emerged from the collapse of the Roman Empire, much knowledge was lost. But some things survived in monastery libraries and private collections. Classical texts describing various torture devices, including the brazen bull, were preserved and eventually rediscovered. By 800 CE, as European kingdoms solidified and sought ways to maintain order, variations of the brazen bull began appearing across the continent. The medieval version served a different purpose than its ancient predecessor. Where Greeks and Romans used it for execution and entertainment, medieval authorities discovered its value as a tool of interrogation. The mere sight of the bronze beast, they found, could extract confessions from even the most hardened criminals or stubborn heretics. They rarely had to actually use it. The threat alone was often enough. The Holy Roman Empire reportedly commissioned 3 brazen bulls, strategically placed in different regions to maximize their psychological impact. France built one in Lyon that was specifically designed for use during the Albigensian Crusade against the Cathars. England's Tower of London may have housed one, though records were deliberately destroyed during the Tudor period. We only know of its possible existence through oblique references in administrative documents. The medieval church's relationship with the device was complicated. On one hand, torture was seen as a legitimate tool for saving souls. Better to suffer in this life than burn in hell for eternity. Pope Innocent IV Papal Bull Ad Extirpanda of 1252 officially sanctioned the use of torture in heresy investigations, though it stipulated that such methods should not cause death or permanent injury. While the document didn't specifically name the brazen bull, inquisitors interpreted it as tacit permission for its use. The Spanish Inquisition, despite its reputation for creative cruelty, actually showed restraint when it came to the Brazen Bull. Tomás de Torquemada, the first Grand Inquisitor, reportedly witnessed a demonstration of the device and declared it excessive even for the worst heretics. This from a man who had no qualms about the rack, the strappado, or burning at the stake. What did he see that disturbed him so deeply? Let me explain exactly what happened inside the bull during those medieval executions, based on the forensic understanding we have today combined with historical accounts. The victim, usually naked to maximize the heat transfer, would be forced through a trapdoor in the bull's side or back. Once inside, they faced complete darkness. The interior was painted black to absorb maximum heat. As the fire was lit beneath, the bronze would begin to warm. First, it would feel like being in a hot room. Then, as the temperature climbed past 100 degrees Fahrenheit, sweating would begin profusely. The victim would start to feel dizzy as dehydration set in rapidly. At around 120 degrees, the metal touching their skin would begin to cause first-degree burns. As the temperature continued to rise, reaching 140 to 160 degrees, the victim's skin would begin to blister wherever it touched the bronze. The air inside would become impossible to breathe without searing the lungs. The victim would try to minimize contact with the metal, but in the confined space, this was impossible. Every movement brought new agony. Death typically came not from burning but from a combination of factors. Hyperthermia as the body's core temperature rose beyond survivability, dehydration as fluids were sweated and boiled away, and eventually shock as the body's systems shut down one by one. The entire process took between 10 and 20 agonizing minutes, though some accounts suggest that with careful fire management, sadistic operators could extend the suffering for up to an hour. The pipe system that created the bull's bellowing was an acoustic marvel. Medieval texts describe various designs, but most involved a series of chambers that would modulate the frequency of human screams. The larynx's vibrations would be channeled through progressively larger chambers, dropping the pitch while amplifying the volume. Some designs included wooden reeds that would vibrate with the airflow, adding an animalistic quality to the sound. Disturbingly, the bronze of the bull would preserve certain remains. After each execution, bones would be removed, cooked clean by the process. In Rome, these were sometimes sold as curiosities or magical talismans. Wealthy Romans wore them as jewelry, believing they contained the essence of the victim's suffering, which could ward off evil or bring power to the wearer. By the 13th century, opposition to the Brazen Bull was growing, but not for the reasons you might expect. The Fourth Lateran Council of 1215 prohibited clerics from participating in trials by ordeal, which included torture-based interrogations. This wasn't about mercy, it was about theological concerns that forcing God to reveal truth through torture was blasphemous. The real shift came with the legal reforms of Frederick II, Holy Roman Emperor. In 1231, he issued the Constitutions of Melfi, a comprehensive legal code that standardized punishments across his realm. The Brazen Bull wasn't banned outright for being cruel. Frederick had no problem with cruelty. It was banned for being impractical. The device was expensive to build and maintain. It required significant amounts of fuel to operate. It could only execute one person at a time, making it inefficient for mass executions. And perhaps most importantly, it was too theatrical. It turned execution into entertainment, which could potentially make martyrs of the victims. One by one, other kingdoms followed suit. France officially outlawed the device in 1303, though rumors persisted of secret bulls maintained by certain nobles. England banned it in 1351 during the reign of Edward III, who declared it unseemly for a Christian nation. The Holy Roman Empire formally prohibited it in 1532 with the Constitutio Criminalis Carolina, Charles V's attempt to create a unified criminal code. The official reasons given for these bans were always practical or procedural. Disturbs public order. Incompatible with proper legal procedure. Excessive cost for minimal benefit. But reading between the lines of historical documents reveals a different story. Even in an age when public executions were common and torture was legally sanctioned, there was something about the Brazen Bull that unsettled people at a fundamental level. It was the transformation that disturbed them most. The device didn't just kill, it transformed human suffering into something else, something that sounded natural but was fundamentally unnatural. The bellowing that emerged from the bull's mouth was neither human nor truly animal. It existed in an uncanny valley of sound that triggered a primal revulsion in those who heard it. Historical records from Constantinople in 1074 provide us with one of our most detailed medieval accounts. A woman named Mary of Antioch, accused of plotting against the Byzantine Emperor, was sentenced to die in the bull. The execution was held in the Hippodrome, with thousands in attendance. The court chronicler, who was required to watch and record the event, wrote, "As the fires were lit, a silence fell over the crowd that had moments before been calling for blood. When the first sounds emerged from the bronze beast, strong men turned away and women fainted. It was not the knowledge of suffering that disturbed, for we had all seen death before. It was the sound itself, neither man nor beast, but something between that should not exist in God's creation. Many who heard it reported nightmares for months afterward, dreams where they themselves were trapped inside, their own voices transformed into that terrible bellowing. Monks and theologians began to speak out against the device, though carefully, as opposing state punishment methods could be seen as treasonous. One brave Dominican friar, Brother Thomas of Cologne, wrote in 1289, "We do not just inflict physical pain with this device, we destroy the very essence of human dignity. The victim is robbed even of their voice, their final words transformed into the mindless bellowing of a beast. This is not justice but a perversion of God's creation." This growing opposition reflected a broader shift in medieval thinking about the nature of justice and punishment. The old Germanic tradition of brutal public punishment as a deterrent was giving way to a more Roman-influenced system of law that emphasized procedure and proportionality. The Brazen Bull, with its theatrical cruelty, belonged to an older, more primitive form of justice that was becoming embarrassing to kingdoms that wanted to be seen as civilized and Christian. The Enlightenment would later bring philosophers like Cesare Beccaria, who argued against torture not just on moral grounds but on practical ones. Tortured confessions were unreliable, and excessive punishment bred resentment rather than respect for law. Rousseau and Kant would add their voices, arguing that the state's right to punish must be balanced against human dignity. The Industrial Revolution would demand more efficient justice systems that could process large numbers of cases quickly. Modern prisons emerged, ostensibly focused on rehabilitation rather than pure punishment, though the reality often fell short of the ideal. But did the Brazen Bull truly disappear when medieval laws banned it? The historical record suggests otherwise. In 1584, An English traveler named William Lithgow claimed to have witnessed a brazen bull in use in Malaga, Spain. His account, published in his travel memoir, describes watching a convicted heretic burned alive in the device during a public auto-da-fe. The Spanish authorities denied the account, but Lithgow provided details that suggested first-hand observation. In 1701, a French Jesuit missionary named Father Jean-Baptiste Labat reported seeing a brazen bull in Ottoman Algeria, used by the Dey to execute pirates who had betrayed their crews. He described the device as ancient beyond measure, said to have been captured from a Roman galley centuries ago. The screams, he wrote, could be heard from the harbor, causing sailors on ships to weigh anchor and flee rather than listen to the horrific sound. As late as 1801, when Napoleon's troops occupied Malta, military engineers reportedly found a brazen bull in the fortress of Fort St. Elmo. The device was documented in military inventories but mysteriously disappeared during the French evacuation. Some historians believe it was thrown into the sea. Others suggest it was taken as a curiosity to France, where it vanished into a private collection. Modern archaeologists have been able to confirm the existence of only 3 brazen bulls through physical evidence. One, discovered in Athens in 1836, is a small model that may have been used for demonstrations rather than actual executions. Another, found in Sicily near the site of ancient Akragas, shows clear signs of use. The interior is coated with a layer of carbonized material that analysis suggests is consistent with burned human remains. The third confirmed brazen bull has a more controversial history. In 1962, during renovations of a subbasement in the Vatican, workers discovered a bronze bull that appeared to match historical descriptions of the device. The discovery was immediately classified, and the area was resealed. The Vatican has never officially acknowledged the find, but leaked documents suggest that forensic analysis was conducted, revealing traces of human DNA from multiple individuals. Why was this discovery hidden? What did they find that necessitated such secrecy? Here's what they never tell you about why medieval laws truly banned the brazen bull. Information that comes from fragments of documents, whispered accounts, and records that were meant to be destroyed. A document from 1542, hidden in the Vatican's secret archives and only recently discovered by researchers, reveals something profoundly disturbing. It's a report from a Spanish inquisitor named Diego de Simancas, who was investigating why several of his colleagues had refused to use a brazen bull that had been captured from Moorish pirates. According to de Simancas, multiple witnesses across different executions had reported the same phenomenon. Sometimes, the bull's bellowing would form words, not just random sounds that might be interpreted as words, but clear, distinct phrases in languages the victims didn't speak. Names of people in the crowd. Accusations of crimes that would later be proven true. Secrets that the victim couldn't possibly have known. One account described an execution in Barcelona where the bull allegedly spoke the true name of an inquisitor who had been living under a false identity for 20 years. Another told of a victim who had never traveled more than a few miles from his village. Yet the bull spoke in perfect Arabic, delivering what witnesses recognized as a Muslim prayer. De Simancas concluded his report with a chilling observation. The device does not merely kill the body. It opens a gateway to something else, something that speaks through the suffering. Whether this be demons, the souls of previous victims, or something worse, I cannot say. But I recommend that all such devices be destroyed, and the metal scattered so they can never be reconstructed. Medieval authorities didn't ban the Brazen Bull because it was too cruel. They had no shortage of cruel execution methods. They banned it because they were afraid of what it might reveal, afraid of what might be speaking through it, afraid of what door they had opened through the combination of human suffering and acoustic transformation. The Brazen Bull stands as perhaps history's most honest torture device. Unlike the rack, which pretended to seek confession, or the Iron Maiden, which was claimed to deliver swift justice, the bull existed purely to transform human suffering into a spectacle. It didn't pretend to have any purpose beyond the demonstration of absolute power and the complete destruction of human dignity. When medieval laws banned it, they weren't choosing mercy. They were choosing to hide their cruelty behind more acceptable facades. The gallows, the block, the stake. These were all brutal, but they didn't transform the victim into something inhuman. They allowed the condemned to die as humans, with their final words intact, their screams their own. Today, we've sanitized punishment even further. Lethal injection pretends to be medical. Electric chairs are hidden behind prison walls. We've removed the spectacle but not the suffering. We've hidden the cruelty but not eliminated it. The impulse that created the Brazen Bull, the desire to punish, to make examples, to demonstrate power through pain, remains embedded in our justice systems. The Brazen Bull reminds us of an uncomfortable truth about human nature. Given the right circumstances, ordinary people will create extraordinary evil. Perillos wasn't born a monster. He was an engineer, an artist in bronze, who used his skills to create something abominable. The guards who operated the bulls across centuries of use weren't psychopaths. They were men doing a job, following orders, normalized to horror through repetition. Every society believes its methods of punishment are justified, that its violence is necessary, that its cruelty serves a greater good. The ancient Greeks believed the Brazen Bull demonstrated divine justice. The Romans thought it showed imperial power. Medieval Christians convinced themselves it saved souls. What will future generations say about our methods? What barbarism do we currently accept as normal that will horrify our descendants? The story of the Brazen Bull is not just a tale of ancient cruelty. It's a mirror held up to humanity, reflecting our capacity for creating suffering and our even greater capacity for justifying it. It shows us how quickly brutality can be normalized, how easily suffering can become spectacle, how readily we can transform human beings into something less than human. The bronze bull may be gone from our public squares, but its spirit lives on in every system that prioritizes punishment over rehabilitation, fear over understanding, power over compassion. Every time we choose retribution over restoration, we're lighting a fire beneath our own Brazen Bull, transforming human potential into the bellowing of beasts. The screaming never really stops. We've just gotten better at muffling it, at transforming it into statistics and case numbers, at hiding it behind concrete walls and bureaucratic procedures. But if you listen carefully, in the silence of a death row at midnight, in the tears of a family visiting a maximum security prison, in the nightmares of those who operate our modern machinery of punishment, you can still hear it. The bellowing of the bull. The sound of humanity consuming itself. The echo of every cruel device we've ever created to hurt one another, reverberating through history, reminding us that the capacity for creating suffering is matched only by our ability to convince ourselves it's necessary. The Brazen Bull was banned not because medieval society became more merciful, but because they recognized something in it that frightened them more than death itself. The possibility that in transforming human screams into animal sounds, they had revealed what we really are beneath the thin veneer of civilization. Not divine beings made in God's image, but animals capable of unlimited cruelty, bellowing our pain into an uncaring universe. That's the real horror of the Brazen Bull. Not just that it existed, but that we created it. Not just that it killed, but that crowds gathered to listen. Not just that it was used, but that it took centuries to ban. And not just that it's gone, but that we've simply replaced it with more sophisticated ways of destroying each other while pretending we've evolved beyond such barbarism. The next time you hear about an execution, a harsh sentence, a punishment that seems to exceed the crime, remember the Brazen Bull. Remember that every generation thinks its cruelty is justified. Remember that today's necessary evil is tomorrow's historical atrocity. And remember that the only thing standing between civilization and the bronze beast is our willingness to say, no more. The screaming never really stops. It just gets harder to hear.